Hello, friends. Since things are starting to get good right now, I thought I would, wear one of my nice dress shirts because I've been inside all the time. And I've got my best Dr. Pepper here. It's time for a read aloud. The weekly peace meeting. The weekly peace meeting. As the sun set over the distant islands, Marcus today sat at his dressing table in his private chambers. He adjusted his robe on his shoulders and secured it, just so, around his neck. He doffed his favorite slippers and put on his walking shoes for the trip into Quill. But then he chuckled to himself, remembering he'd put the gate up again. Perhaps he wouldn't walk into Quill today after all. The walk was one of his favorite parts of his new routine since the battle. Sometimes Claire accompanied him, and that gave him some lovely time to spend with his daughter. But he really favored the walk when he was alone, while the road was hot and the odor and scenery left much to be desired along the way to the palace. It was often quite deserted for a good portion of the way. And it gave Mr. Today so much. It gave Mr. Today some much needed peace and quiet from the mostly friendly chaos that had overtaken Arteme. It was good for him to be alone sometimes, he knew, and occasional solitude was especially good for the creative mind. Some of his best ideas of the past month came out of that weekly walk. The greatest of which was Alex Stowe. The boy was young, but Marcus had no doubt that he would flourish in the years ahead. And the old mage was set on helping Alex build his self-confidence and belief in himself as being worthy of the title of Mage of Arteme. It would take time, but Alex would come around eventually. As Marcus smoothed his flyaway shock of his hair, I know, it's been a long day. He thought back on his meetings with Alex over the past months. How fun it was to surprise the boy with his eccentric ideas. How smart Alex was and how capable. And how disappointed the boy could get when he wanted something so badly but was denied. He knew back then that Alex would feel incapable of being mage. He also knew, more than Alex himself, that Alex wouldn't want anyone else taking the job from him. Oh, he'd say to his image in the mirror, that reminds me. He picked up a pencil and scribbled a note to himself after the meeting. Teach Alex triad spells. He chuckled to himself as he put his pencil down. Oh dear, getting forgetful, he said. It wouldn't do to leave out that little gem now, would it? In fact, I'll grab it now. He got up and walked out of his chambers and across the hall to the Museum of Large. Inside, he gazed at the overflowing piles of books for a long moment, concentrating. Slowly, he walked halfway down the library wall to the very center of the middle shelf and pulled out a thin, handwritten diary simply called The Triad: Live, Hide, Restore. He brought the book to his chambers and set it on his dressing table so he wouldn't forget to give it to Alex that night. A moment later, there was a light tapping on the doorframe. Miss Morning poked her head in. Hello, dear, Mr. Today said, smiling brightly. Ready, Father? Just about, he said. Has Alex returned with the boat? Not yet, Miss Morning said. She was starting to get worried. But she knew that there was no better companion for Alex to have than Cimber. I'm sure they'll be back before we get home after the meeting. Perhaps we should wait. Claire smiled. Father, you put us in charge. Alex is no doubt handling everything with the utmost care. And if he and Cimber are not back by morning, obviously you can cancel your trip. Mr. Today nodded. You're right. You know, Claire, this is very good for me to let go of a few things now and then. I know, she said. Mr. Today turned to Charlie, the gargoyle. Never heard of Charlie before. Charlie, can you let Gunner know we're on the way? Charlie gave Mr. Today 3 thumbs up. He'd always felt very lucky to have 3 thumbs, so he used them all whenever the opportunity arose. Mr. Today and Miss Morning left the mage's private chamber and walked across the hall to the kitchenette. Miss Morning stepped to the side of the tube and flourished regally with her hand to her father. Age before beauty, as they say. Mr. Today chuckled softly and stepped into the tube.